update. Mr. Smith.
Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Smith, as of count today, we have 6 projects simultaneously going on. Right now, the LC opened up the kitchen, and that space continues to be demoed and put back together. Media center, glass doors, and furniture going in place. A lot of site work around the building. The parking lots have, on the north side, have been demoed, and new infrastructure going in. LC athletic fields, what you're seeing there is a new baseball field, which is to the left, and then the next slide are the 2 soccer fields on the right side of that. LC pool continues on. A lot of inside work being done as the roof continues to go up. LN Kitchen, again, is demoed and going back in place. New walls, ceiling lights, and wall coverings. Continue with the demo on the 2-story. We also demoed the north athletic entrance. A new face and a new entryway will go in place there. LN site improvements continue on. Again, you see the football or the baseball diamond there where the JV field used to be. And again, soccer field is going in with new turf. New parking lot at the baseball and soccer area, and then also the south and north parking lots getting new curbing, new traffic flow, and milling of asphalt. Belzer continues phase 1. Actually, we've got a lot of demo taking place and even some replacement items going back in. This is the auditorium at Belzer. The new area on the west side has started to develop. Fall Creek Valley, a lot of roofing going on in that building, staged in the south parking lot, ready to go on. Actually, they were shot backing the rock off today. And Fall Creek Valley, again, phase 1 on the inside. Most of the demo work has been completed, and put back is going, has already started. LC site improvements, if you've been driving around this building, a lot of site work going on. A lot of people have asked, yes, the tennis courts are going to be put back. We're taking out the old and putting the new in. And the portable's almost finished. They got the concrete work, putting up the ramps and steps, and soon to be wired. A lot going on in the district.
Questions from the board?
I have one. Thank you, Mr. Smith. A lot of construction. Good stuff. I just had a general question about the middle schools. I know there's a lot of excitement about that getting underway. Can you tell me at what point, like, I don't know how to word this, by the time students go back in the fall, what portions will be done as far as the classrooms for them to move into?
The goal is all classrooms that we have torn up this far will be back together and teachers back in their into those rooms before school starts.
Okay.
And then we'll move into another phase.
Yes, thank you.
I don't mean to interrupt you. Mr. Smith, I do have a question that was asked from a member of the community. Do you know if our intention is to keep early voting at the LECC site, given the amount of construction that's happening?
We will continue with our voting site here. Yes.
Great. Thank you.
And I have a question that's been asked from a few people. With the LC being ahead of schedule a little bit and LN being ahead of schedule with the pool, will the projects finish together on time?
They're still different because they're about 6 months apart. So roughly maintaining our same schedule. So they'll both be done within 6 months of each other.
I
Okay.
think the big piece, Roger, is the LC pool is going to be after.
Oh, the pool, correct. LN pool will be accessible in July for them to utilize. And LC's pool will not be until next spring.
Okay. Okay. So, and the same for Belzer and Fall Creek Valley, you know, if one side of the district feels like their school's getting done first, the other school's not getting
They're
done.
both on schedule, 2.5 years for both.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That gives me my talking point.
Thank you.
That's great. Um, Are there any other, Ms. Dunn, do you have a question? No? We good? Okay, so thank you very much, Mr. Smith, and we'll move on to classified employee handbook updates. Ms. Johnson.
Good evening, Madam President, Dr. Smith, and members of the board. This evening, we bring to you our classified handbooks that are being revised to be implemented for the 23-24 school year. Our classified employee book is really comprehensive, and we have a revision overview. And the revision overview, on page 3, the in-service professional development training. Optional training will be paid at the per diem rate determined by the appropriate department. There's updates to the translation services pay on page 3, in which employees are scheduled to perform assigned language interpretations for parent-teacher conferences on a weekday that's not a school day will earn their hourly rate regardless of the time of the day of services are offered. We have just a list of revisions: retirement pay, bereavement leave, jury duty pay, social media use, code of conduct, progressive discipline, attendance, all of those pages, and the anti-harassment compliance is included in there, in which we've updated a name change. But all of those are there for your review. And then the second handbook that we are updating are changes to our transportation handbook, and there is a summary of the pages, and that a new director of transportation came on in October and has updated the purpose statement. There was some deleted verbiage regarding choice of physician and payment for CDL physicals on page 7. We changed the verbiage for the bus maintenance request to digital form. Added verbiage for linking specialized positions eligibility to employee evaluation scores on page 11, and added clearer definition of employee probation. All of these points have been reviewed by our district attorney. Added disciplinary offense verbiage for failing to maintain and submit pre-trip logs. Changed and added cell phone usage verbiage. Added disciplinary offense verbiage for failing to use sidewalks, crosswalks, and covered walkways while walking on the bus parking lot. Added disciplinary offenses verbiage for parking school buses anywhere the bus parking lot other than the bus's assigned space. And they closed the loophole regarding repeated cell phone violations, disciplinary action.
Great. Board comments.
That's probably page 1. It goes on to page 2 with revisions.
Oh, sorry.
if you care for me to read all of those on the second page.
Pardon?
Please continue.
Yes.
Alrighty, on page 2, added disciplinary offense verbiage to category 4, critical offenses for negligent actions that directly result in endangerment, injury, or possible injury to a student on page 14. Moved and changed disciplinary offenses for failing to use special needs equipment or other bus safety equipment improperly to a category 3, which is a major offense, page 14. Moved and changed disciplinary offense for operating a school bus with the entry door open to category 4, critical offense, page 14. Moved and changed disciplinary offense for driver exiting the driver's seat without the parking brake engaged, split into 2 levels, a category 4, a critical offense if the bus moves but does not make contact with any other object. Category 5, a terminable offense if the bus moves and makes contact with any other object, page 14 and 15. Added disciplinary offense verbiage to category 5, a terminable offense for unauthorized releasing of a student with special needs from the bus unsupervised, on page 15. Change from 2 to a 4, additionary disciplinary points for a preventable accident while backing unassisted unauthorized, page 15 and 23. Added verbiage to category 5, a terminable offense for knowingly failing to report an accident involving a school bus. and change verbiage regarding two-way radio communication to reflect new operating system and channels on page 24. And there was just numerous changes to their staff contact list, which has been updated on page 28.
I think so. Wow, okay. So, board,
I have a couple questions, please, Madam President.
yes.
First of all, thank you so much for all of this wonderful information. I was curious about on page 17, you talk about child abuse, and I'm just wondering how employees are developed on reporting the mandatory child abuse and how that is documented at the school level. Or perhaps at if it's transportation, at that department level.
So in the beginning of the year, we have our Safe Schools modules in which all employees from all
Yeah.
categories are trained and they sign off on that. So then it's in their file that they have knowingly gone through the training and signed off. And then a leader, whether it's a principal or division leader, will be able to follow up on that and talk about the steps that are involved if there should be a violation.
Thank you. And then for professional development, I know in our strategic plan, thinking about alignment to our strategic plan, one of the things that are in the board goals is increase, or which is in our strategic plan, is to increase staff support to improve retention and reduce turnover and improve workplace satisfaction. Is that something that we could name in the professional development section on 18, so that they understand the alignment to our equity goals and our strategic plan?
Certainly, we'll be willing to look at that.
Thank you.
Take notes of that.
It says on page 18 of the classified, I just thought, since we're giving so much credence to our strategic plan and our equity goals, it would be, because that is part of, it's my understanding, all employees will participate in common district developed PD for all job classifications, that potentially it's named in there that is specific towards equity.
And once we put it in the board goals, it goes for everyone. But I do want to do for Ms. Dunn a point of clarification. When we talk about students reporting for any form of abuse, that goes through Sean Bush's division. Matt, I know we have that in the handbook. I just want the board member to know that. That goes through student services. So Ms. Bush is our point of contact completely for all of that. So the handbook just aligns to what we have Carla Johnson for all of our employees, okay? But I just want the board to know that just on the record, okay? Okay.
Great. And I would just like to add thank you so much for the hard work on all of these changes. And, you know, when we're asking, you know, what is safety, you know, you spent a lot of time with transportation on explicit safety items. So I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Shall we board go on to the proposed Board of Education meetings for 23-24? And that, I'm presenting that evidently.
It's up on the
Evidently.
board for you, Madam President.
Yes, so let's take a look at those. And as I look at those proposed dates, I am very glad to see that we have fewer months this year. This last school year, dates fell kind of strangely, and we had 3 or 4 months where we had one meeting. So I'm glad to see we only have a couple, December and another one. So I'm glad to see that. I also want to mention that it would appear that we're meeting right after the sun disappears on April 8th. Isn't that April 8th? So we have a work session scheduled that day. Is that a problem for anyone here? Is that a problem for any administration or board members? If we're all in agreement, that's not a problem?
Just don't look at the sun before you
Just
come to
check with
the.
the
Yeah.
experts to see if
Yeah.
it passed by them. I believe that it will have passed by that time.
It will?
So we've had a chance to see it, so.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We've not had a
Safely.
chance to see it.
Safely.
We've had a chance to experience it. We're not going to look at it. Okay, all right. That's the only question I had. Board, do you have any other questions about the dates? They look good to you? Okay, then we're good with those dates. Thank you.
You'll bring those back for a vote next meeting.
Sure. Student achievement, Mr. Noterer.
Thank you, Madam President. And Madam President, Dr. Smith, and members of the board, I bring to you this evening Part 1. This is the first installment of student achievement reporting from the 22-23 school year. There'll be several more to come as we have data available that we're able to share in the public. So we always like to frame this in the context of your board goals. So this board goal we're going to talk about this evening is growth of 10% in the number of students meeting grade level proficiency on our district benchmark assessments in reading and math in all racial subgroups. And just as a point of reminder and clarification, for the 22-23 school year, that assessment was FastBridge, which is administered through the parent company Illuminate. For 23-24, we will be moving to iReady. So I'm just sharing that with you as a point of clarification for this board goal. As we look at our overall district level results, as a district, we had 8% growth in math in terms of proficiency, 7% growth in reading. Specific to subgroups, we did see a 12% increase in our Asian population. And although that's a small subgroup for us, it is a growing subgroup. And because of the numbers, we are accountable for the student achievement in that subgroup. Also, our dual language English learners, we track that data closely as we're expanding our dual language programming, also grew by 10% in math. Our Black and Hispanic subgroups at the district level grew 8%. In terms of individual school level, all 4 of our ELCs and 5 elementary schools met the board goal in math. As we switched to reading, we had all of our subgroups grow, but no subgroup at the district level reached that 10%. Our highest subgroup growth, again, our dual language learners, English learners at +8, our white subgroup, and our multiracial subgroup. At the building level, 2 ELCs and 3 elementary schools met the board goal in reading. And so this is the hard data. There's a lot of data here, but I do think a couple points to take a look at here. The total number of students tested, that just gives you an idea of the number of students. This is a K-8 assessment. And so, for instance, our Black subgroup continues to be our largest subgroup, followed by our Hispanic subgroup, followed by our white subgroup. And so you can see the number tested for each subgroup in the fall, and then comparing that to the spring. And so that's for math. You see green in terms of all of the increases in proficiency from the beginning of the year to the end of the year for both math and reading. In terms of next steps, we have a extreme focus on continued professional development for all of our teachers. We have very robust offerings this summer in the following areas. So equitable student outcomes leads the way and is woven through all of our professional development. More specifically, the science of reading, as we're looking at attacking our reading achievement, particularly in our younger grades, our primary grades focused on the science of reading. You approved last month our new curricular resource for math, and so we'll have significant professional development around that curricular resource, and our instructional framework with a focus on culturally responsive instruction within our instructional framework, and then social emotional learning, and particularly our partnership with Dr. Lori Desautel. She's back with us this summer. One point I'd like to make is our continued partnerships that support accelerated learning. We know that in terms of recovery from the pandemic and unfinished learning, that we can't do this by ourselves, that we've got to have robust partnerships. And so we have tracked the data closely of our students who have been receiving Huntington tutoring services, both within our schools and at the center. And we see a positive growth percentile, accelerated growth for those students. Also, students who are being tutored by our retired teachers. We ended up with 34 teachers, retired teachers, that came back to serve our students during the school year. And as a cadre, those students who've received tutoring from retired teachers also showed accelerated growth. And then ongoing data-driven support for principals. Each of our schools is very unique and very different in terms of the population that they serve and the type of support that they need. And so we really work hard to individualize that support for our principals based on their current data. The next board goal we're going to take a look at tonight is our rigor diagnostic goal. And the goal for 22-23 was to achieve or exceed an end-of-year rigor diagnostic score of 9.0 or grow by 2 points from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And just a reminder to the board, or maybe not a reminder, but to share how we've arrived at this goal over the years. As we introduced our instructional framework to the school district several years ago, we rolled it out in phases. So our elementary actually is a couple years ahead of where our secondary is. And so that's that 2-point growth, knowing that we were rolling out at different paces and different levels. And so 9.0 or 2 points growth from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. As a district, our growth was 1.75. We did have 4 elementary schools that achieved the 9.0 or higher, and I do want to call out 3 by name because they scored 10.0 or above: Mary Castle, Forest Glen, and Crestview. We had 6 additional schools that grew by 2 points, including, for the first time ever, all 4 of our secondary schools. So the instruction is moving at our secondary schools. And again, for the first time ever, all 4 of them reached the level of the board goal. So this is just an overview of the process. This is a beginning of the year to end of year type of assessment. So all schools receive their rigor appraisal or their rigor diagnostic at the opening of school, August 9th. So that is shortly after school starts, getting in there to evaluate instruction. We have some schools that receive a mid-year check-in, mid-year boost. All 4 of our secondary schools did. And then our consultants come back at the end of the school year, same measurement, same standardized process, and assess our instructional practices. And those practices, on the next slide, are divided into 5 different areas. So on this slide, you can see what those areas are. So conditions, that's your classroom environment. What's the classroom environment look like related to learning rigorous standards? Standards-based student evidence. So are we on point in terms of teaching standards? That we're not off doing something else, but our students are actually producing work that is related to standards. It's not what the teacher's doing, it's what the students are doing. The next one is achieving student teams or activating student teams to achieve the standard. So are students talking with each other? Are they working together? Are they collaborating? Is there that type of environment in the classroom? And are there structures in place for students to be able to develop language through collaboration in the context of achieving rigorous standards? Then are our teachers verifying learning? So this is that check for understanding that teachers do. Are they verifying that students are learning? And if they're not, are they taking action immediately within the lesson? And then what are our tracking processes that we have that we're tracking student progress towards achievement? So those are the 5 pillars that make up the total score. In terms of next steps for that particular goal, again, it's very individualized based on where a school leadership team and the principal are, what their current data is. So continuing that individualized support for our school leadership teams. The continued alignment of our evaluation model. So our teacher evaluation model, it's also known as FTEM, the focused teacher evaluation model, and aligning those particularly with a focus on equitable student outcomes. And again, lots of professional development offered at the Learning Summit around our instructional framework. Would be happy to entertain any conversation or questions.
I have a few. First of all, I would like to celebrate the 34 retired teachers who are coming back for our kiddos. That's a big celebration. When we talk about retaining highly effective teachers, they don't even get to count in that.
Right,
But
right.
that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Hooray for our secondary schools for meeting that 2% growth. That's a big deal because I do see year after year, the higher the rigor score, the higher the achievement.
That's correct.
I do see that. So that is a big deal for our teachers and for our kids. Bravo to the staff and the teachers. We do notice that there are some schools that are very high performing, high achieving, both in rigor and otherwise. And I guess I will leave you to mull a little bit till the end of the conversation. Are we doing something so that those schools, those teachers can share their practices throughout? Now, I know you said the populations of the schools are different, but what are we doing so that those schools can share their practices? I notice on slide 10, on the bars, I'm thinking if we could just skip that beginning of the year, they'd all made 2%. Well, so but the question, that begs the question, what's the dip in the middle of the year? Was it a different team that came through?
No, we only do 5 schools in the middle of the year, so we did our 4 secondary schools, and as I said, their implementation is a couple years behind our
I see.
elementary.
So it doesn't really
So that
reflect
brings
the
the average
district.
down, right?
Doesn't really, okay.
Right.
And could you give me just one quick example of culturally responsible instruction?
So I think related to this slide even that's on, the activating student teams to achieve the standard. So we know that our students need opportunities to interact with each other. They need opportunities to tell their story to each other. And as much as we can do that in the context of academic learning, it really makes a difference for students. When we think about our English learners and developing academic language, that only occurs when you're practicing academic language. And so if it's the teacher who's talking all the time and the teacher directed instruction versus turning it over to students, turning it over to students would be an example of a culturally responsive practice, and it's reflected in that data.
Fabulous. And these are all huge wins for the district. And bravo to your team. Bravo to everybody. The achievement is up. But however, we created goals last year, and we didn't quite meet our goals. So I just want, as we go to board goals, I know we're going to have another day of discussion about board goals before we're ready to pass board goals. So as we go to board goals, there'll probably be some directed questions about what's attainable, because I don't think anybody could work harder than Lawrence has worked this year for those achievement gains, but they didn't quite meet that 10% or that in rigor that they didn't all meet that 2% or 2 points or 9 points. So let's have that conversation in board goals.
Sure.
Okay.
Question? I have a question. And I know one of the cultures of one of them, I'm huge on cultures. Cultures have a huge impact on achievement and just all that goodness. Do we know what are some of the cultures? I know Forest Glen, because my children went there, but the culture even of Crestview and Marycastle. I only ask that because if you are paralleling the achievement gap with the opportunity gap, a lot of it is culture also, culture, access, feeling included. What are those cultures, and do you think that, I'll just put a ellipsis there. Anybody like?
From a demographic point of view, Crestview and Marycastle are very diverse schools. Marycastle has a dual language program with a large Hispanic population. Crestview has a growing Hispanic population, but African American is their largest subgroup at Crestview. So they're both very, very diverse.
May I ask also, even as far as the longevity of the teachers, are there teachers that have been there? How does that look? I know Crestview has a lot of teachers that have been there for a while, right?
Well, we've actually had quite a bit of turnover in both of those schools. And so I would say more than longevity of teachers, it's the systems that have been put in place by the leadership teams, that those systems transcend the turnover of teachers. And so there's a certain way that we do PLCs. There's a certain way that we do data analysis. There's a certain way we do professional development, and that has lived on beyond turnover of teachers. And so I think that stability has helped.
Okay, just from what I observe and what I see, just like with Forest Glen, like we have a very unique culture. Everybody's more family oriented. Like it's just so just thinking of in terms as we're looking at rigor, achievement, just as equally important as the cultures of our schools. So I thought that was kind of cool that the schools that did very well were the ones I think have what's the verbiage for that one?
Strong family culture?
Culturally diverse, but also there's a connection piece that's a little
Sure.
differently. There we go. More
Yeah,
of a
and success
connection.
breeds success.
Yes.
When you're successful, then you're able to solidify those systems and achieve more success as you move forward. So, absolutely.
Thank you for entertaining my question.
I just had 3 clarifying questions. Thank you again for all this data and the work you guys have been doing. The first one that was just a thought I had as a non-educator. Is there data on student achievement for those who've attended Jumpstart?
There is.
Okay.
And you may recall last year we had Purdue University do a study for us where they actually tracked the end of the year data for on our district benchmarking on FastBridge and beginning of the year data for students who attended Jumpstart versus similar students who did not attend Jumpstart. And there was a very statistically significant difference between the two. We also had Marian University do a data study on our Orton-Gillingham approach, which is specific to the science of reading. And those students who received additional Jumpstart instruction in small groups for Orton-Gillingham specific reading instruction, same thing. Definite increase and statistically significant increase in our district benchmarking for those students.
Thank you for that. And then to go along with that, this is on slide 3. I believe learning loss was noted higher in math from the pandemic. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And now it's looking like our district data, it was, this past year, it was more in reading. Is that correct? More schools didn't meet the reading goal. Is that correct?
That's correct. And we saw this last year too, in that because there was more loss in math, we're making that up faster where there was more stability in reading. And so even though we only had a 1% difference between math and reading, we are seeing that accelerated growth with math for the last 2 years.
Thank you for that explanation. And then I promise this is my final question, just again so I can understand the data. On slide 3, that was on K through 8 schools, correct?
Correct.
So would that be 17 total schools that data was collected on? So the 2 middle schools, the 11 elementary, and the 4 ELCs. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this report. Couple of questions. So I know that on slide 2 that you indicate that we're moving from FastBridge to iReady.
Yes.
What type of training is being done for the teachers as they get ready for a new assessment?
Now, we've actually done iReady this year. This has been our transition year where we, and it's been a lot for the teachers to administer 2 assessment systems. They've done both FastBridge and iReady in preparation for the switch next year. And so we've had ongoing professional development all year. And administered iReady all year so that our teachers could become familiar with the assessment, but really more importantly, become familiar with all the instructional resources that are within iReady. So even though the board goal was around FastBridge, we were also learning iReady at the same time so that they're prepared for next year.
And so I know that you have presented on the board goal of benchmark assessments, but wondering what type of data that we have about because I know you were talking about the science of reading, about our dyslexia screener and how many students are at risk or at some risk for dyslexia at BOY compared to end of year?
Yes, we do have that data. I don't have it off the top of my head, but we do have that data.
What assessment have we used this year? Because I understand we might be switching assessments. Is that correct? Or is Amira, is that the assessment that we've been using?
We use the iReady assessment for the dyslexia screener, and that's what we'll use next year as well.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one more question. I want you to get out your crystal ball. Because I understand that state standards are changing again. And so just as we start to make progress, do we have an idea? It looks like they're diminishing the number of actual state standards, making them more streamlined. Do we have any idea what that's going to look like? We do?
Yes, we do, and we have our curriculum teams working on that now, aligning the new plan from the state with our scope and sequence. The iLearn assessment doesn't change for next school year, and so we'll be implementing new standards with the priority that the state has given, but they've also identified important standards. So there's essential standards and important standards. And so for next school year, we're going to need to be able to do both because the iLearn assessment won't change. The following year is when it's predicted that iLearn will begin to change. So that'd be the 24-25 school year. And that school districts can opt in to participating in those changes with iLearn that right now the Department of Ed is indicating that it would be one vendor that would be the benchmark assessment and the summative iLearn assessment. It would all be the same vendor across the state. So we could opt into that in 24-25, with then it being statewide in 25-26.
It seems that that would be helpful to have one vendor doing both assessments.
Yeah, I do think that that would be helpful.
Yes. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Troy, you
Okay.
answered that question twice.
Yes.
We're on the right page.
All right. You stick around long enough, Dr. Smith, you kind of, yeah.
You know what's coming.
All right, so let's move on right now. Dr. Harshbarger, our Neola policy updates, and Ms. Dunn.
And a historic number.
Waiting.
Historic number.
There's a lot of
This is not number. This is not normal, Tim.
Madam President, Dr. Smith, members of the board, I bring tonight for information Neola Revision Packet, Volume 35, Number 2, consisting of 38+ policies for first reading. Just as a reminder, policy revisions are a result of ongoing review of statutory language at the state and federal levels, court decisions, OCR investigations, and recent legislation, which there was many, I don't have to tell you. The revisions recommended in the update are deemed necessary to comply with changes in the law, both at the state and federal level.
Board, we have read our policies,
I'm so excited.
and I would like to know if you have any questions. And before you say that, I just want to say I was very disappointed because I usually find at least one typo. I didn't. I'm very,
Really?
no. I think there was one policy that was displaced,
Yeah,
One
well,
over.
I apologize.
so
but
we got
fixed
that
one
taken
this
care
morning.
of.
It kept coming
Um,
back.
Other than that, I
Thank you.
I would, yeah, go ahead, board. Go ahead. We'll start on this side. Ms. Dunn?
I just want to extend a mass amount of gratitude to you for your incredibly hard work on in such a tight turnaround, because literally we got the information and you've met with Neola, we met and we're going back and forth, and just an incredibly well done job. And so really appreciated working with you and appreciate your willingness to take feedback and listen to any concerns. But all in all, it was an amazing process. So thank you for your leadership.
I appreciate your flexibility in meeting. We met a lot.
Okay, so I'll just thank you both for doing just that. There's a lot of reading this time around. Hopefully, fingers crossed, next year we don't get so much legislation that it impacts our
I think it's
district.
going to go up.
Because I know how hard that is to change the policies to reflect it. And I will say, nothing is more riveting for a Sunday afternoon reading session than 38, is that what it was? 38 policy revisions. It was good. Thank you guys for your efforts.
Ms. Norman, Ms. Puckett?
I second and third that. Thank you, Ms. Dunn and Dr. Harshbarger for working on this. Dr. Smith just informed me we normally don't get this many policies, or revisions. So, honestly, I've been reading through it. I still have to chew on it. From my mind, at this level, my only concern is what extra burden some of the legislation might provide on staff. And that's just my deep thought out there. But I appreciate what you guys are doing right now. So thank you.
I second, third, fourth, everything that everyone has said. Seriously, thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Thank you, Dr. Harshbarger. That was a lot of reading. Great reading as far as just staying in the know of things. Just thank you. I'll just leave it at thank you. But I'm concerned as well. That's, yeah.
It's safe to say for the board, more to come. Many of the July 1 legislative changes have not come out. So we will expect some more guidance. So we'll see more policies coming forward once we get guidance from the Department of Education. And so we'll see even more policy updates.
And we'll also have some administrative guideline updates as well. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. And you probably see more of that than we have in the past. But our next package should be coming mid-July. So it's going to be a quick turnaround. Some of the policies will not go into effect as laws until January 1. So we'll also find that out soon, which those will be after July 1.
Dr. Harshbarger, I wonder if we might just be able, for the members of the public, to clarify how these policies come through the state legislature and then make their way, and how the board is then beholden to, even if we maybe personally disagree with some of the changes that have happened, how the board is then held accountable for state legislation.
And that's it. Most of it's coming right out of the legislation. There may already be existing policy, but because of what is changed in the laws, then the policy itself has to reflect that change. We obviously can have counsel review anything that we're concerned about. We have that ability up to a certain point. And so really that's the biggest chunk of it. You'll see when there's a legal case, that will trigger policy adjustment as well. We have usually seen it be pretty consistent twice a year. Now it's going to start coming probably 3 times a year.
Okay, so I would just like to echo what everyone has said. Ms. Dunn, I have been on the policy committee. It's a chore, but Dr. Harshbarger makes it a lot easier. So,
We had fun.
so thank you both, and also bravo for making space for our nursing mothers. That was a nice policy. That was good.
Yep.
Okay. There's no more questions. We'll move on. Mr. Miles, permission to advertise furniture RFP.
Thank you, Madam President, Dr. Smith, members of the board. Tonight I bring to you first as an information item and then later this evening as an action item request the need for an RFP to advertise for new furnishings, new furniture for our new projects that are coming up. The last time we did this was early 2020 in advance of the high school projects and our referendum. So we wanted to do our due diligence and do the similar process for our upcoming middle schools and other projects. So that's what I bring to you tonight.
Are there any questions on that? Board? No, we're good.
Actually, I do.
Well,
What do we do, Mr. Miles? What do we do with the old furniture?
That is calculated into the transition when we purchase new furniture. So that's all part of the removal of and disposal of. And actually, Roger may be able to speak to that a little bit more than I can because he's been involved in that process. So.
Go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, some of that, what little furniture can be resold back to them, they do purchase. A lot of it then is thrown out, if you will. It has extended its life expectancy. So most of it, the broken items we don't want to move on. We have donated in the past to overseas, if you will, several containers where we did it in bulk rather than auctioned it off. So we're looking at some of that as well as we move forward.
On the recommendation of Dr. Haas-Brown and Mr. Kuznick, I bring to the board our action items and the first action item, board goals. And before we get started, I would like to say I do believe the board will have one more meeting today defining our board goals before we're ready to pass them at the end of June, which hopefully keeps us on track to have those board goals ready July 1st. Do we agree on that, board?
Yes.
Okay, that would agree on meeting that goal. Okay, so, do we, as we've been through this a few times, do we need an additional reading of the board goals at this time for the public? No.
We've published with, Madam President, we've published these as
Correct.
part of the agenda, so
Correct.
I'm comfortable.
Okay,
with
all right,
everything else that's
I'm
moving
comfortable
forward.
too then. If you're all comfortable with that, let's move forward into discussion. And who would like to begin that discussion? Board members?
I can start. So for me, it was really important to do a crosswalk of the currently proposed board goals, as well as potentially some shifts, and then our alignment to both our strategic plan and our equity work. And so I think the first board goal that we have is implement equitable student outcomes action plan in progress and outcomes to be reported for the public on the dashboard. And so, as we were talking about previously, it would really be helpful if we had SMART goals that we were, obviously measurable and timely. In one of the areas where I feel like we are really missing calling out things that are in both our strategic plan as well as our equity goals is specifically our strategic plan D.1 through D.4, which really is talking about our culture and on climate. And so just as a reminder, D1 is new discipline data collection system. So having disciplinary dashboard, instituting a restorative justice program, defining terms, and then tracking data of racial identification for students referred to LEAP. And so I think when we're thinking about student achievement, we know, as Secretary Puckett was saying earlier, that the culture and climate of a building is paramount to how students are performing. And so I would respectfully request that we look at potentially adding some type of goal specifically surrounding culture and climate.
Do you have, Ms. Dunn, do you have wording for that would?
So
Can
I
we-
think
can we
I
think
would
of a
like to have
framework for that?
something, I'd like to have some discussion, but also to have it aligned to what, really, I think if we had some baseline data pertaining to, and this is something that I think we could see, if we could see discipline data that's disaggregated by our subgroups, then I think it would give us a launching point to know, especially if we're making a measurable goal, to know what are the suspensions like for our students of color compared to our non-students of color. What are suspension rates? What is attendance data? I think there's so many different metrics that we could look at, but not knowing the specific data, it's hard to create a goal without knowing our baseline data.
Do you have any ideas on that, Dr. Smith?
Well, I think I understand what Ms. Dunn is saying. I think what she's saying, we have it, it's just in two places. What she's saying, it needs to be in one place under our board goals. So what section would we put that? What Ms. Dunn just described in the culture and climate, would that be under, because see, I see that clearly under our equity goal, equitable student outcomes, Mr. Noder and our team. Where does that fit, or is that a separate goal from the board? I think that's what we're trying to determine.
I would like to see it as a board goal because I think
Right.
it is so prevalent in
Right.
it's in our strategic plan to institute restorative responses versus punitive behavior infractions, as well as equity alignment D1 through D4. So I think having a very, in knowing that there's alignment between
Right.
the culture and climate of a building and the success of students in that building, I think it's something that that I would really love to see
Right.
in place as a board goal.
It's there as a superintendent who evaluates all of our principals. It's in our equitable student outcomes place. The board is saying, we want that to stand out. So how do we write that and make it stand out? We don't have to determine today, but we got to think about that. Because you have an equity goal here that clearly has what Ms. Dunn just described in it.
And may I suggest that we do it as a district rather than disaggregated school by school? Because if we disaggregate it school by school, I think that moves into administrative work.
Sure.
So I think I would like to see that number, a district as a whole,
Right.
which doesn't preclude our seeing in soup notes a disaggregated version. But I'm not sure that as a board, we want to prescribe school by school.
Right. Right. Each school's gonna look different. They're different. Okay. We got work to do.
I can keep going if that's okay.
Please do.
So the graduation rate, I would like us to define accelerated growth. Kudos to all of our educators and individuals in this room for maintaining such a high graduation rate. But we do know that there are disparities between our subgroups. So if we could define accelerated growth for those specific subgroups. In addition, I'm wondering if, and this is a question, we're saying that we're going to have average growth of 12% in the number of students meeting grade level proficiency on district benchmark data. And given the transition between testing, is that something that we think we should keep? I know in our strategic plan, we are talking about the 80% of third graders, but there's nothing in either our strategic plan or in equity goals pertaining to that, either the rigor goals or the benchmark goals. And I think that that brings me to really thinking about the achievement gap again and thinking about our June 2024 average of 80% of third grade students. I think, again, defining accelerated growth for our Black, Hispanic, English learner, SPED, and free and reduced subgroups. Because accelerated learning, are we talking about 1% growth? To me, it needs to be clearly defined. And then when we're talking about increase by 10%, the number of students designated as approaching at or above proficiency in every subgroup on iLearn, to me, if our strategic plan is talking about 90% of students receiving reading intervention will demonstrate growth on iLearn with no subgroup disparities, then where our Black children are currently is far below that expectation. So I think we need to specifically call out achievement and what we are expecting specifically for our Black students. As we look at their data across all assessments, they are performing below their peers, and significantly below. Those are my suggestions and recommendations at this time.
Thank you very much. Others?
Yes, and I want to thank Ms. Dunn for her expertise in the field of education. I do not share that same expertise, and I just would want to acknowledge that and call that out. I'm really grateful for the amount of rigor that you're putting behind these goals, and for the cabinet for suggesting and providing a great place for us to begin these conversations. As I mentioned in the last board meeting, a couple of things I would like to see called out, just given the competitive environment that we are in right now for teachers and for staff. both within other school districts and externally from competing industries. I would like to see more rigor placed around how we understand the culture of our buildings. In the strategic plan, we call out specifically the extending the panorama data or the panorama survey to all staff. And I do understand, Dr. Smith, that there are some potential implications with the LEA. Every indication I have from, just general conversations with members of the public and others who have come up and had conversations with me, I do hope that this is attainable, because I do really want to understand and give our teachers as much of a voice within this district as possible. I think we all share that same goal. And so, as was called out in the strategic plan, I would like to see the panorama data survey extended to all staff, including teachers, administrators, and classified staff, with an 80%, with no less than an 80% response rate, which is aligned with the response rate that we get from all of our students. So I do believe that that's an achievable response rate, given the amount of responses that we get from our students themselves. Additionally, and I do understand that this is already in the work, or is already happening, but exit surveys for 100% of all attriting teachers and staff. I would like that information reported to the board so that we can understand if there are some issues at hand. Obviously, we recognize that there are personnel issues that we don't want to get in the middle of. That is not our responsibility. But where there are challenges that may need to be addressed at the board level, certainly raised to the level of the board. And then the final point that I would raise is around increasing attendance rate for both students and staff to pre-pandemic levels. This is not yet called out in our board goals. I do believe that this is a really critical goal for all of our schools, and something that we should, as a board and a district, be held accountable for. That's all at this time.
Great. And Ms. Lawrence, the panorama data, would that be in people? Are we going to create a new?
That's,
new
I think
category?
it fits under
Fits under
people. I think,
people.
because I view it as a cultural
great.
conversation,
Okay,
as
and
well as
then-
the exit survey.
As well as the exit. And then our attendance rate, I guess, could also go under people.
Potentially people, I do think though, and
Could be a
this is,
separate,
I think
could
that's
be a
up for
separate-
conversation with the board, that it could be a separate goal.
could be a separate. goal,
Just,
yeah.
given the fact that we are still rebounding from the pandemic, and, that we have seen a pretty significant drop in our attendance rates over the last couple of years, I think it's potentially significant enough. It could be called out as a goal in and of itself.
I will make mention that it is in our strategic plan under the culture, improve the learning culture by focusing on behavior, expectations, norm, and consistent services to students, families, and staff. Under the initiative, institute restorative responses versus punitive to behavior infractions. Metric, the bullet number 4, is return district attendance rate to pre-COVID levels beginning with the 23-24 school year.
Yes.
So perhaps we have a new subheading. for
Or
that.
potentially, I'm open to
innovate
anything. I think
culture.
it's,
Yeah.
or in culture, yeah.
Okay, very good. Very good, thank you.
Question.
Yeah.
Concerning attendance, because that's also a state thing, right? You have to have like 95% of your school attendance. So question, if it's a state mandate, is there funding or something that could be utilized to have like a survey to see like what are keeping parents from, what is the hindrance? Is it possible to do a survey to see?
Yeah, what it costs, Ms. Puckett, absolutely. No, there
I
is no
know,
money coming
right.
from the state
I thought,
to do
hey,
that, but that would
throw
be
it out there.
something, but we believe we would pretty much know the answer to it.
Because I know that that's like a statewide thing, so I wonder like,
I know that lots of schools, just based on some of the visits that we've done to schools, are doing creative things to encourage families to, and, perhaps there's an opportunity for us to share best practices. I don't mean to get in the middle of how we actually achieve that goal. I think our goal is just to say we want to see the attendance rate increased. But I do think that there are lots of opportunities that a lot of different schools are doing to increase attendance rates. And I think it'd be worth digging into your point, Ms. Puckett, about the culture in these different buildings and maybe what is working in some buildings versus another.
because I do wonder how much that it coincides concerning, I know we can't publicly speak on some of the specifics of the panorama data, but the attendance and how some of that may coincide as it relates to like SEL, mental wellness, because I know that we've had to have a few mental days for my children. So yeah, I'll be interested to see how we lean into that.
Great.
I just had a couple questions. One was on slide 3 for student achievement. Just a clarifying question on the rigor diagnostic. It said to receive the score of 10.0 or grow by 2.5 points from beginning of year to end of year. I believe this past year it was 2.0. Is that correct? I'm just trying, I know that we had, it was at 9 or 10 of our schools achieved that. Is that correct? Yeah, the 2.0 from last year. I just wanted to understand better. I appreciate having the lofty goal. I just wanted to understand how that number was arrived at.
So this is about accelerating student achievement,
Okay.
accelerating student achievement through strong instruction. And so we can see the direct correlation when a school reaches 10.0 to student achievement data. The 2.5 is for those schools who may be, like our secondary schools, they achieved the 2.0. Now let's ratchet that up to a 2.5, and within a year or two, they'll be at the 10.0 as well.
Yeah, thank you. That makes sense. Thanks for explaining that. And now I'm going to jump over to left field and go to slide 7 for Mr. Smith on security. This is kind of a area I lean into myself, but my first question is on bullet point 1, the requirements per Indiana Code, emergency preparedness plans and drills. Is it possible we could actually add the code number? It's 20-34-3-20, just so that, because I talk to a lot of parents and, you know, a lot of community members are always, school safety is kind of top of mind. I just think it would help make a quicker access point to find what all that entails. Okay, yeah, that's just one little addition. And then could you expound upon just a little bit more on what, I know you can't go into details because you don't, you know, that's not public knowledge, but pre and post security checklist, can you give us kind of like a broad overview of what that might entail? Uh-huh.
Emergency preparedness plan in place and touching all the required areas within for the state's requirements. And then also we look at that based off individual schools, where they set, and what kind of variables do they have around them that may be specific to their buildings as well. So, and then we do a visible monitor of of each building. On a yearly basis. We'd like to do this before each semester, so that if there's items that maybe the building hasn't seen but we have, or vice versa, then we want to make sure that we address those needs per the building.
Okay, thank you. And then now I did think of a third question. When it talks about expanding or updating our new equipment and personnel, that's probably encompassed within our blue ribbon updates. Is that correct?
The majority of that is, yes. But also we're looking at updating, for example, our metal detectors.
Yeah.
They're close to, 6, 7 years old now. So we look at new technology because it changes over time. And can we improve our safety and security and the efficiency by investing in new equipment?
Thank you for that explanation. As a martial artist, I always am very curious about safety and security, so I appreciate that.
Ms. Norman, we're just going to put you at the doors of every school since you are a black belt. I do have one additional question as it relates to safety and security, Mr. Smith. I assume that this is where we would want to add any goals around for any parent who has done pick up and drop off at any of our schools. Is this something that's of concern, or do you think that it would merit calling out specifically in our board goals, potentially kind of an assessment, just in particular given the amount of construction that we have in some of our middle schools, which as a Fall Creek Valley parent, I can attest, is a little confusing when you go through it the first time. So would just be curious if that's something that we should maybe think about calling out here, and would appreciate your perspective on that.
As a board, that's something we address every year. It changes. So making sure that we do address it based on what the building is going through, what the surrounding neighborhood is going through. Road construction has been another one, so that's a moving target. But we do try to address parent drop-off pickup each and every year, and every building's different.
And I do want to say to the board, as a former building principal, a lot of that fell on my shoulders. And Mr. Smith, Jim Parrish and his team, they support, because it does change from year to year and time to time. Our goal is to schedule every kid to catch the bus, to ride our buses. But we know that doesn't happen until school starts, and it changes. So that kind of really plays into the schools and what they need. And so Mr. Smith works very closely with the principals on what they want to do, including the high schools. Of course, they have a larger footprint, just to make sure that we understand clearly what their needs are. Because I think if we set something here, an expectation, it may not fit with what our school needs are. Okay.
Understood. I just
Yeah.
wanted to call it out because it is something that
It is
top
important.
of mind for me daily, as it is, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
and Mr. Smith and his team really come into those principals and support them directly on the first few weeks of school.
And additionally, our Safe Schools Committee meets twice a year, Mr. Smith,
Yeah, we try to meet beginning of each semester.
beginning of each semester.
A lot of individual.
And always, your parents, you go through the drive-through, you do all these things. You have specific concerns, bring them to Dr. Smith. He will get them to Mr. Smith. And those things will be taken care of. You know, we're there for our community, so if we see it, they see it, right? And if someone is at a different school and lets you know, let Dr. Smith know, because there's nothing is more important than the safety of our children. Mr. Smith, do you think, to Amy's point, putting the specific Indiana code in our document, that when it's on the website, we can make that a link? We just link.
That's easy.
Yeah, that's easy. Okay.
Mar says yes.
Yeah, so, okay. And then I would like to work with the board a little bit on maybe wordsmithing a little bit of these safety and security goals, because I don't think a parent would understand pre and post security checklist. So maybe we can have some idea of, what that means and how to measure that.
President Mustin, I
Yes.
was curious, and Mr. Smith, you can tell us what you think, but obviously, every time we meet, we are given such incredible updates about the Blue Ribbon facilities. And so, is there something that we could tie in? Because I know for a fact that there's a lot of thought and consideration into the buildings and ensuring that they're up to the most up-to-date security standards. And so I didn't know if maybe something of that nature, tying in the incredible work that's being done with the Blue Ribbon work with the work that you're doing already, right? To make sure that offices are secured, that, just all the things. If there was something that we could mention here, because I think it is worth mentioning, because so much time and resources are being given, and such incredible work is being done.
And we know that work is being done,
Right.
but
Others may not.
others may
Right.
not.
I think Mr. Smith updates that in the board's private notes, shoot notes that you do have. Roger, I think we can do that with no problem for the community. And I think if you look at past history, I know we have some new board members, when we've made a major initiative change, like we brought the metal detectors in, did a massive upgrade of our camera systems, we did those updates to the public. So I think, Roger, we can just note that and share that with, because we have some more things with Roger's got a lot of toys. He's got a lot of toys and security cameras and metal detectors and wanders and
And we don't want to know
police
all this.
gadgets that we have. But I do think it's worth information for the public to know, and we can certainly do that.
We want to know all the secrets. We don't want to share all the secrets.
Well, the secrets are the people and where they're going to be.
Okay,
So,
okay.
yeah.
So I guess my point is just the point 2, pre and post security checklist, just to add just a little more definitive of what that entails, just a little bit. I think I appreciate the work of this administration. I appreciate the work of the entire board, but I want to say to our new members, I think that you have upped our game. And I think that our board goals next year will be largely the same, but I think they will be better defined and easier to measure and more directed at specific targets we want to meet. So thank you very much to everyone, specifically to Ms. Lawrence and Ms. Dunn, and the hard work you've done on that. Is there anything further?
So I do have a question about that. So when you say that they'll be roughly the same, can you expand upon what you mean by that?
Categories?
Okay.
Roughly the same categories.
Okay.
And, you know, this point that we made, Mr. Noter, earlier, that we set these achievement goals last year, but we didn't quite make them. It's possible that we don't make them again, and SMART goals need to be attainable. So if there's anything you want to change in our achievement goals, let us know.
With all due respect, since these are the board's goals, I would respectfully request that we specifically name, to me, the culture and climate is of utmost importance. From personal experience, I think it is imperative that we have a very deep understanding of what the discipline looks like for our Black and brown children and the potential disparities that exist, especially when we're seeing achievement. And I understand that our district is doing incredible work, but at the end of the day, you can't turn a blind eye to the fact that we have single-digit students who are Black achieving on iLearn, and that is problematic. And so to me, I do understand that we want these goals to be goals that are attainable, but we inspect what we expect. And if we expect that we are grounding ourselves in equity, to me, equity is making sure exactly what we're saying, and that is that we're not leaving any student behind. And currently, our Black children, some of them are being left behind. And so I think it's imperative that we name that. And I certainly don't want to be coming across as combative, but I am unapologetic about wanting to make sure that my daughter and every student that looks like her has a fair shot. And it starts, the prison to pipeline, school to prison pipeline is a real thing, and I don't want to see it happening. We've seen way too much just incredible violence in our community. And as a school district, I think it's incumbent upon us to do all we can to ensure that the equity gap does not exist. And so that is my request,
Thank you,
that
Ms.
we
Dunn.
take that.
I would say that everyone in this room shares your concern, shares your deep concern. And my question for you is, would you like to add a heading, culture and climate, to our board goals? Okay, so board, what we need to do is make suggestions for the wording we want and the measurements we want to take, okay? Keeping in mind, there are some culture surveys, et cetera, our schools do, that we get overviews of, and we will not get school by school data, because that, again, goes to administrative work.
Right.
But we can get district overviews, right? So if we want to add a culture and climate, I'm thinking there was something else that we added over here. I'll have to look through all my notes. But the panorama data.
Panorama data as well as the
exit
attendance.
surveys, and attendance. That maybe those things can fit under culture and climate instead of people.
And I think defining what accelerated growth for the subgroups is incredibly important. I would say that I know that schools are required to report data on discipline, and so that should be data that is easily accessible. So in order to be able to create a draft of any sort of goal, I would need to know what our baseline data is, but I'm happy to take a shot at that.
So, Madam President, so that I'm clear, you will collect all the suggestions from the membering board. We'll put that together, share with administration. We'll try to wordsmith it and bring it back so that we can seek approval later on this month. Is that correct?
Yeah, board,
Okay.
please email me all the suggestions made. I would say no later than the end of the week so that we have time so I have time to put that together so Dr. Smith can have it Monday morning for his cabinet meeting. And so that over the weekend, I have time to compile it and you all have time to assess my compilation and make sure it reflects what you want to see. Okay?
Yes. Can I add to that also?
Yes.
I wholeheartedly agree. You know, I'm on the other side and just thinking also that as we are doing, we're currently, the equity audit, as where we are, like with category D with the discipline portion of it, specifically like on D4, I'm just gonna just give a brief, D4, hold on, y'all, Lord, I need some glasses. Where we're basically, no, D3, I'm sorry, where we're now in the process of defining terms concerning behavioral infractions and so forth. So that slide there. So my only concern as making it a goal for this year is that could we be hitting a moving target right now as we are establishing a definitive culture on what defines as disciplinary terms, changing the culture as far as that? My only concern is, would that be are we able to streamline it to where it's actually measurable if we're currently in the process of defining specific terms for it? Or would this be something, I don't want to say next year, because we definitely have to monitor, and am I articulating? It's being worked on currently in our equity audit. So what would that look like as a goal if basically it's kind of moving and we're adjusting to what needs to be done now? My concern would be, like, if that is a goal, would that be an attainable goal while we're still trying to find measurements and movements and language for what we're defining for certain disciplines, behaviors?
Ms. Puckett, is it possible that we could say something like define baseline?
Yes.
Maybe define baseline for this year so that we can so that we can have a goal to work with next year? Just a thought.
Yes, because we're in the part of just getting started with that. And so language and definitions are everything. And so while we're defining or getting the, training and that would be my only concern, is how accurate or how attainable that, or what that goal would look like with us in where we are with the equity audit dashboard right now. That would be my only concern.
Right, so it will be really important to gather all of your concerns and all of your points for the changes to the board goals, definitely by the end of the week, so that over the weekend, I can compile them, get them to you, and we can make sure that we're saying what we want to say and have a chance to have this conversation. Because I think your cabinet would like to have those Monday.
Oh, absolutely. Thoroughly
Secretary Puckett, it does say on D3 that next steps were that training with Peace Learning Center was scheduled for July of 2022. And so that should have been done a year ago. So my assumption is that there's got to be some baseline in terms of, or a code of conduct that's being utilized.
Just something just to have that metric that we're talking about.
Because it states in the equity goals that was done in July 2022.
And board, of course, I'll have a conversation with you where I think we may have some problems on what we say. Because remember, your board goals have to be easily understood. And as well as your administrator and teachers out there have to be able to achieve them, because that's where the work is going to go. So I hear what Ms. Dunn is saying, I hear all of you are saying, let's bring that together. You got a team here that can work it, and we can put it together where it's understandable for all and achievable for all of us.
To that end, the one thing, and I don't mean to interrupt, To that end, the one thing that I would also call out is that if we don't believe that something is achievable, we need to ensure that it's changed across all of our documentation and that the board is aware of when those changes are made. Because the last thing I want to do is have a goal that does not align with the other board-approved and community-created plans that are in place. The other thing I would want to call out as well is I feel very strongly, as you all know, about the panorama data and the cultural piece of this. I know, Dr. Smith, that you wanted to have a conversation with the LEA. I would actually like to have the LEA at the next board meeting so that we could have an understanding of how they're feeling about this survey. Perhaps we could invite them, or whatever sort of approval process we need to go through in order to ensure that it aligns. If we're going to vote on something, I want to see the panorama data as part of that board goal, and I don't want it to be left out simply because we haven't gotten approval or gone through this.
So we have something called district discussion.
Sure.
That we will take those practices. So I don't want to change that.
Sure.
And make this the forum where that type of business is done, because your administrators, they have a process to talk with teachers. I think in my notes I share back with you all that we will have conversation with the teachers about those things. We have a lot of surveys in education. And so we want to make sure that it fits. If the board survey becomes a priority, we've got to filter out some of the other things that we're doing, or they'll come back and start complaining to you that we're giving out too many surveys.
I should say that this is not a board survey. This is a defined survey that was articulated in the previously board-approved strategic plan. The panorama data survey would be extended to staff.
And we want to
So
discuss,
that's where that
we want
comes
to
from.
talk with them through our work, not in this room. We have district discussion, and I meet with Justin, we have a whole process. Because if you don't want us to do that and it happens here, then we don't need to have those processes.
No, I understood. I'm not trying to get in the way of any process. I just want to ensure that we have that as something to vote on and that it's not delayed in the next board meeting.
Okay, great comments. I feel pretty strongly we can get this done by the end of the month. And that was the stated goal, to have it ready for the beginning of the school year. I don't think the board is trying to create a 70-page strategic plan document for board goals. I still think it'll be concise and easy to understand, and your cabinet will come back to us through you with recommendations based on our requests. Okay?
Can
All
I
right.
ask a quick question about that? Because I know that the July 1st is an important date. Superintendent, how is this information shared with the various stakeholders, including our families, our staff, and just kind of to the point of getting it done by July 1?
You're talking about our board goals?
Yes.
We will obviously utilize technology to send those out. We have newsletters that go out, Madam Board Member, every single week. But in our district, we go a little bit different. Board goals have always been shared by myself. I visit every school and speak directly with our staff in their buildings, in their culture. And I'm not going to brag about that, but I don't know a lot of superintendent districts this size can do that. We do that. And so the staff, they fully understand. I talk with them. It's a dialogue that takes place. First and foremost, we're going to share them with our administrators. And then we take it to their buildings and we talk directly with our teachers about the board goals. And I think, guys, do your work. Once you get those goals settled up, you vote on them, you'll have full support from our community of learners and leaders that we have in our district. Teachers and leaders that we have in our district. Okay.
Dr. Smith, are you referring to your road shows?
Yep.
So I know in years past, they have been extremely informative, and Dr. Smith visits with not all, but many of the administration come along to, to talk about the various silos that make up our district.
Right.
Will you let the board members know when those are? Because from years past, if we wanted to just be there for one of those presentations, we could, and it's very helpful if you can show up to one of those. It's very helpful to see how the communication is meted out to our schools, which is very personal and I think unique. So, all right, are we ready? Ready to move on? Okay, thank you, board, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Smith, Cabinet. Approval of the permission to advertise furniture, RFP, Mr. Miles.
Thank you. Once again, Madam President, Dr. Smith, members of the board. As we discussed earlier, we would at this time like permission to advertise an RFP for furniture for our upcoming building projects. And again, the time sensitivity tonight is somewhat due to our board schedule over the summer and just the lead time on getting these materials and the furnituring ordered for those upcoming projects. As you know, everything takes longer to get in these days, so the sooner we can get going on that, the sooner the better. So I would ask tonight for permission to advertise that and that the board approve so.
Do we have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Are there any questions about the RFP for furniture? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Mr. Miles, you have permission to send your RFP out. Now we come to the approval of the personnel report. Ms. Norman, do you want to make a recommendation?
I recommend,
No, no.
oh,
Oh, I see.
Oh, yeah,
This is no consent.
That's
Yeah,
right.
there's
That's
no-
right.
I was like-
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right.
Personnel standing alone.
Yeah, that's
It's
right.
the only item we bring.
Okay, Ms. Johnson.
Technically.
Madam President, Dr. Smith, and members of the board, approval
Yeah.
is sought for the personnel reports this evening that have been submitted.
Motion to approve?
so moved.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We've approved our personnel report. And do we have a guest?
Carla Johnson.
Hey.
Madam President, Dr. Smith, and members of the Board of Education of Lawrence Township has just approved the appointment of Ms. Amanda Kurga to the position of Principal of Crestview Elementary School effective July 1st, 2023. Ms. Kurga comes to Crestview from Sunnyside Elementary, where she has served as the Assistant Principal since 2019. Throughout my years of service to Lawrence Township, I've had the opportunity to learn from its dynamic leaders and develop my service and organizational leadership skills. I look forward to utilizing all I've learned to best serve the Crestview community and to support all students' academic, behavioral, and social emotional growth. According to Dr. Smith, I believe the Crestview community will be impressed with the experience and the skills that Ms. Kurga brings to the school. I'm confident that we have selected the best person to continue leading the school on the path of successful teaching and learning. Ms. Kurga began her career in Lawrence Township in 2013. She has served as a teacher at both Harrison Hill and Sunnyside elementary schools. Prior to joining the Lawrence Township staff, she was a part of the core member of Teach for America for 2 years. Kurga holds a BS in elementary education from IUPUI and completed her master's degree in education and leadership at IUPUI in 2016. Congratulations, Mrs. Kurga.
Thank you. Congratulations.
I want to introduce you have family here.
Yes. I do have family here, and I apologize for our interruptions. I have a 16-month-old who is very busy. My daughter, Aubriana, is here with my dad, Dan, and my mom, Kelly. So, thank you.
so much.
It's the cutest possible distraction we could have, so thank you for bringing her along.
And a child's happy noises will never be an interruption to this board.
Not at all.
Come on down, Amanda. Shake their hands. Shake everybody's hand.
I love it.
we have reached that point in our meeting where it's time for administrator and board comments. And I would like to begin by saying graduation was exciting. It was wonderful. It is really the thrill of a lifetime for all of those graduates. And, you know, that you shake all those hands and that thrill of a lifetime kind of just runs through your body. There were so many times during the music that was played, during other moments in the graduation when I just had goosebumps. So it was wonderful to be there with all of you, and ask my board for further comments. Ms. Dunn?
I will defer to Ms. Lawrence. She's got her
I was-
microphone
well, I
all
was-
excited.
I was just going to echo what you were saying, Madam President. You know, one of the when I first, and I actually wrote about this recently on LinkedIn, because when I first decided to run for school board, I was worried that it was going to interfere with work and school and family objectives and things. But it's really stunning to me how much, not just my professional group of people, but also my personal group of people are very supportive, and especially last week when I missed a very major conference for my company, but everyone at my company was so thrilled that I was going to be at graduation delivering diplomas into the hands of students. And one of my colleagues said to me, "That is so cool. You're there at one of the most important moments in someone's life, and you're actually handing them a diploma." That's something that not a lot of people can say. So I just want to echo the excitement and you know, grateful for the community of people that allow all of us to sit up here on this dais and be able to work through all the important work that we do as a district. Ms. Dunn? Okay.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
I just have 2 points to cover tonight. So, yeah, I echo that on graduation. It's always a thrill. I could do it 100 times and love it. And again, special thanks to all you who worked behind the scenes, operations, security, the secondary group. I know it was a labor of love getting to that point, and I felt like it was such a great event both nights. So thank you for that. And then my final point is one, as a parent to fellow families, make sure you do the RSVP process. I have 3 kids at 3 different schools, and it took me less than 30 minutes. So just my own friendly reminder on Skyward.
Good point.
Just because we're board members doesn't mean we always remember it. Thank you.
Same here. You wanna go?
It's up to you. Do either way.
I'll go ahead and go. Y'all know I'm that caller outer person lady. I'm grateful that we are being adaptive and using data as a flashlight and not a hammer. And I was just writing down what I was just feeling as we navigate the goals and expectations of our district. I'm grateful that we're able to hold space for positive tension. There is a thing of positive tension, and that's where the greatest change takes place. This enables us to dialogue and lean in for the greater good of our district. I'm grateful that we hold space for this tension. Some may see it as negative. However, I ask that you reject that negative feeling and see the tension as heart speaking to hard decisions that we make and follow through on. I'm encouraged to know that EQ is equally important to IQ for us all, and that we will continue to utilize both in discussions. So I just wanted to name a feeling right now. I wanted to just speak to the positive place of it. And I'm grateful for all of you because it's allowed me to dig deeper. It's allowed me to grow. And so I'm grateful and I'm thankful for that. So that's it.
Thank you. I want to echo everyone's sentiment. I also want to say happy Pride. As a mother of a daughter who is part of the LGBTQ plus, it is extraordinarily special that we can look around and see the culture and climate that has been created here in this district that welcomes all students, including my daughter when she was in high school. And that doesn't happen in every single space. And so I just want to express my gratitude. I know I'm very passionate about the outcomes for Black children because of my own daughter. But I'm equally as passionate about the love and nurturing environment that everybody has given all three of my children, including my child who was struggling with identity when she was in the halls of Lawrence North and Fall Creek Valley. And so just thank you very, very much for that, and continue to provide those safe spaces for our students as they're navigating a tumultuous time in our nation's history. So mad gratitude to the LT community.
Dr. Smith. I was so excited about graduation. I was so excited about, I would echo the happy pride, and doctors, and I will say, I'll just, as a one-off, I was challenged by family and friends at the recent wedding of my daughter to please wear a sari to one of our board meetings. Don't know that that's going to happen, but you may see it. You may yet see it. I hope you do. Okay.
Well, I'll keep mine brief. Ms. Bush and our team, this weekend, we have a big celebration, Juneteenth celebration, that we will support the city of Lawrence and Arts for Lawrence at the Culture Center on Saturday. So just a reminder of that important event, and that our offices will be closed next Monday for the Juneteenth holiday. So that's all I have today, Madam President and board members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our being a work session, we don't need to have a motion, so we are dismissed. Good meeting, guys. You have a minute? Okay, we'll meet. I have to make sure I get this. Oh, my username.